The one on the lake, right. Now, I was in high school. I was about 18. This was right after high school. I had a friend who was actually my sister's friend also, who was still in school, was a few years younger. Right. Basically, and then I know we're on limited time, that this was a multiple abduction. I remembered the abduction, and he had a profound close-up sighting of a craft. He was camping out overnight, and he saw this craft over his head about 100 feet over the treetops. The next day, he told me about this extraordinary sighting, and then I proceeded to tell him about my memory of being taken with him, which scared him.
What happened?
In terms of, I don't know where to start, but because he had that profound sighting, and of course, you mean just an overall, take you through an overall, like, it started with me the night before. I had the memory, I woke up in the morning, that I was taken up into a craft, and when I was on the craft, I remember seeing him come up through the floor of the craft, and I remember seeing him on a table at one point struggling, and I remember he was very fearful, and I remember lying on the table. At another point, I remember they put these, like, helmet-type devices on our heads, and they put us through some sort of a visualization. It was like I could see imagery of, like, flying over a landscape, and I saw green forestry, and it was beautiful. It was a feeling of elation, and I remember when I exited the crowd, that's the event we talked about where I struck the alien. I hit the alien in the eye because I was upset that they had upset my friend. And then the next day, he told me that they were on the lake they were camping out in a boat on the lake overnight. In the middle of the night, they had a sighting of a craft which was hovering over the trees about 100 feet up in the air. As it moved, it would change colors. It was surrounded in a kind of misty light, and it moved directly over them. And it had a light on the bottom of it, which he felt like was watching them. And then he heard a buzzing sound, and then next thing he remembers, the craft was moving away, and it was dawn. It was 3 hours later, and the boat was in a different location on the water than it was when they first sighted the craft. So me and him both put it together. That makes no sense. He had a skip in time, which we've come to realize is missing time. But so I proceeded to tell him that I remember that I had this memory that we were taken together. That wasn't good news to him. That scared him, but we were also followed around by the men in black for a whole week following his sighting.
And what did you remember about him on the craft? Because you turned around and confronted him and described what happened, and he went into full denial. What was it that you experienced with him on the craft?
It was mostly separate, because when I was taken, they laid me on the table. They did, I don't know what. I just remember them, grabbing me, and I don't remember the details of what they did, but I was on my back. Then after that was through, I was just sort of standing there, or sitting on the table, and I observed him come up through the floor, and he was resisting, so he was aware, and they were like pulling on him and grabbing him, and when he was on the table, he was resisting, and they were holding him down, and he looked really scared, and it looked like they were hurting him, just the way they were handling him, and it upset me, because this is my friend, and that's my memory. It was mostly separate. It was like I had my experience, they did whatever with me, then they did whatever they were going to do with him, which I don't remember, other than after that, we had this shared experience where we were sitting across from each other in chairs, maybe 10 feet apart, and we each had this helmet on our head, the purpose of which, I don't know, but there was a visualization. It's like when we put this helmet on, it was just like virtual reality glasses, where I was seeing whatever they were showing me.
And what about the photograph that you have of the lake with the craft? How soon after the abduction was that photograph taken?
Immediately. I woke up, the sun hadn't even come up, because I woke up and I went outside, and I was somewhat of a photographer at the time, and I took 2 pictures of the boat on the water, which they were camping out in. There were 2 boats. The first picture I snapped was before sunrise, and the second picture, the sun was just starting to come up. Just before I snapped the picture, I had a UFO sighting. I saw a craft, clear, solid object floating over the treetops. And what happened was I blacked out, just like in the event with the implant. And then I forgot about that sighting until years later. So they wiped that memory from me. I snapped a photo of the boat, and it was about 15 years later, 12, 13 years later, I found that photograph in the attic. And I just noticed it. And I hadn't noticed it at the time, that object was over the trees.
Well, do you, we're going to be headed to a break, and I don't want to get too deep here, but do you remember anything specific about what happened on the table? And was it like the other stuff that we have heard before from other abductees?
I really don't, unless I were to go and explore that further with hypnosis. I don't remember specifics other than that I was lying on my back. I was aware of a being on my right, a being on my left, at the end, at my feet.